there is no wind. For 9 days, 1,000 ships have sat on a beach in eastern Greece, loaded, crewed, and going nowhere. The man who assembled this fleet has just been told what it will cost to make the wind return. 1 life. His daughter's. You already know he does it. That isn't the story. The story is that for the next 1,000 years, the Greeks could not leave this scene alone. They rewrote it, repeatedly, each generation reaching back and altering what the father did, and they all altered it in the same direction. The trap he built. Agamemnon ruled Mycenae and commanded the largest coalition the Greek world had assembled. His brother, Menelaus, ruled Sparta. When Menelaus's wife Helen left for Troy, taken or willing, depending who tells it, a private humiliation became a public cause. But 1,000 ships is not a rescue. It's an invasion. Troy sat on the strait between 2 seas, taxing everything that passed. It was rich, and it was reachable, and every king in that harbor had sworn to follow him. Not Menelaus, him. That is the detail that decides everything after it. The fleet wasn't only an army. It was a public verdict on Agamemnon's authority, delivered by every rival he had. Then the wind stopped. 9 days. Armies that aren't fighting start thinking. Kings who knelt start reconsidering. And his priests supplied a reason. The goddess Artemis was holding the wind, and she had named her price, Iphigenia. Now watch what happens in his head, because this is the actual subject of this film. Agamemnon stops asking the question a father asks. He stops asking, "Should I kill my daughter?" He starts asking, "What happens to all these men if I refuse?" Those aren't the same question. The first has an obvious answer. The second has an answer he can live with. He hasn't decided anything yet. He's done something worse. He's changed the subject. He could have sent for her with the truth. Instead, he wrote to his wife at Mycenae and told her their daughter had been offered a marriage to Achilles, the most enviable match in Greece. Iphigenia traveled to the coast believing she was going to her wedding. She arrived at an army. And this, not the altar, is where I'd locate the beginning of the crime. Because a lie shaped like that one doesn't protect the girl. It protects the man telling it. It secured her physical presence before anyone could argue. It converted a proposal into a logistical fact. It borrowed the name of a man nobody had asked. Achilles learns he is engaged when a stranger congratulates him. And it bought time to prepare the army for a decision Agamemnon had not yet admitted out loud that he'd made. By the time she stepped down from that carriage, the soldiers already knew what she was for. Which meant stopping was no longer a change of mind. Stopping would look like fear, in front of every king who had sworn to follow him. He had built a room with no doors, walked into it, and called it fate. The room full of people saying stop. The deception collapses within hours. Clytemnestra approaches Achilles about the wedding. Achilles has never heard of it. His name has been used as bait, and he has been made a fool of in his own camp. He offers to defend her by force. Clytemnestra pleads. For one narrow window, Agamemnon is surrounded by people telling him, loudly, to stop. And then his daughter speaks. In Euripides' play, she doesn't argue strategy or theology. She goes somewhere much harder to withstand. She reminds him that she was the first child to call him father, and that he was the first to call her his. She tells him she has nothing to offer but her tears, and that if he kills her, he will have to live in a world where she is not in it. He has an answer ready. The gods demand it. 4 words, doing an enormous amount of work. Psychologists have a name for what that sentence performs. Albert Bandura called it displacement of responsibility, the mechanism by which ordinary people carry out acts they would otherwise refuse by relocating the authorship of the act to somewhere above themselves.
The order came from higher up. I'm the instrument, not the author.
It is the most reliable moral anesthetic our species has found, and every institution that has ever needed terrible things done has run on it. But look at what is actually true in that tent. A prophecy applies pressure. An army applies pressure. A king still signs. He has power, she has none. And calling the outcome destiny does not move the decision out of the hand that makes it. The oldest surviving full account of what happens next was written by Aeschylus in Athens around 458 BC. He refuses to let it be heroic. He describes her lifted over the altar like an animal, her robes falling. And one detail he seems determined we cannot look past. They gag her, not for her sake, to stop her speaking. Because a girl about to be killed by her father might say something. She might curse the house. She might simply ask him why, out loud, where everyone can hear it. So the last thing taken from her, before her life, is her voice. And the wind returns. The army gets what it wanted. And Agamemnon has just created a debt he has not begun to calculate. His daughter is now the reason the war cannot be abandoned. Troy must fall. Not for Helen, not for the tolls. Because if Troy does not fall, she died for nothing. Now stop, because everything you have just watched has a problem. Our oldest surviving Greek epic is the Iliad, composed around the 8th century BC. Agamemnon is central to it. The Trojan War is its entire subject. The sacrifice is not in it. Not softened, not alluded to, absent. And in Book 9, Agamemnon tries to buy back Achilles' loyalty by offering him a marriage, and lists the daughters available. There are 3: Chrysothemis, Laodice, Iphionassa. A name many scholars take to be the same girl later called Iphigenia. In the oldest version we possess, his daughters are alive, and the wedding he's offering is real. There are 2 ways to read that silence, and scholars argue both. Either the story hadn't been invented yet, or Homer knew it and chose to leave it out. Notice that both answers arrive at the same place. Either this is a story someone added, or it's a story the earliest voice we have decided not to tell. Either way, somebody made a choice. The altar surfaces in a later epic called the Cypria, a poem now lost, surviving only as a summary written centuries afterwards. And in that version, at the final moment, the goddess swaps the girl for a deer. Iphigenia is carried off and made immortal. She doesn't die. Then Aeschylus takes that scene and removes the rescue. No deer, no goddess. A gagged child and a father who goes through with it. And near the end of his life, Euripides writes the version most of the world now remembers, and puts in 2 things nobody had written before. He invents the wedding lie, and he invents her consent. Partway through his play, Iphigenia stops resisting. She declares she will die willingly, for Greece. Look at what each one does. The lie makes Agamemnon worse. It converts a man crushed by circumstance into a man running a deception. The consent makes the whole thing survivable. For us. If she chooses it, we're permitted to find it beautiful. And then one more turn, which is almost too neat to be true. That play's ending, where a messenger bursts in to announce that the goddess substituted a deer after all, and the girl is alive. Most editors do not believe Euripides wrote it. The meter drifts, the style slips. The scholarly consensus is that somebody else added it later. Somebody, generations downstream, read the version where she dies and could not leave it that way. Set the versions in order, and they don't scatter, they move. Alive, then rescued by a miracle, then killed brutally, then deceived,
and then consenting. And then somebody quietly hands the miracle back. Every generation reached for this story and adjusted the part it could not tolerate, which is exactly what he does. He never changes his situation. He changes the question until the answer becomes bearable. And then, for 1,000 years, everyone downstream does the same thing to his story that he did to his choice. There's a name for the engine underneath this.
In 1959, Elliot Aronson and Judson Mills ran an experiment on effort justification, a prediction from Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance. People who endured something unpleasant to join a group rated that group as more valuable than those admitted freely. The more it costs us, the more worth we insist it had. Not because the worth was there, because the cost is unendurable if it wasn't. Watch it run on Agamemnon in real time. The sacrifice justifies the war justifies 10 years of dead men. Those deaths justify burning the city, and the burning city becomes proof the sacrifice was necessary all along. Each atrocity retroactively purchased by the one before it. Barry Staw named this pattern in 1976, escalation of commitment, the documented tendency to invest more in a failing course of action precisely because of what's already been sunk into it. He can't stop. Stopping would mean she died for nothing. So he continues, and every step he takes makes the first step harder to regret. Troy falls. He wins. He sails home expecting what victors expect. His wife has had 10 years alone in a palace, with the memory of a letter promising her daughter a wedding. She receives him beautifully. She spreads crimson cloth for him to walk on, and he walks on it. Because in Aeschylus, this is a man who has never once declined a display of his own importance. Then she kills him, and her accomplice is this film's Theseus, standing in a corner. Aeschylus is not just her lover, he's Agamemnon's cousin, completing a feud that started a generation earlier, when Agamemnon's father served Aeschylus's father the flesh of his own murdered children at a banquet. Aeschylus kills Agamemnon for his brothers. Clytemnestra kills him for Iphigenia. Orestes kills Clytemnestra for his father. The Furies come for Orestes, for his mother. Not one of these people believes they are committing a murder. Every one of them believes they are settling one. That's what a cycle of violence actually is. Not an absence of morality, a surplus of it, with everyone starting the arithmetic on a different date. He never said, "I want my daughter dead." He said, "The army needs this." He said, "The gods demand it." He said, "There is no other way." That last sentence is the one still in daily circulation. It converts ambition into duty, cruelty into necessity, and a person into a price. Because prices, unlike people, can be paid. He didn't become a monster when the blade came down. He became one earlier, quietly, when he stopped asking whether it was right and started asking what refusing would cost him. And then everyone who inherited the story spent 1,000 years performing a gentler version of the same move, sanding the edge off, handing the girl back, letting her volunteer until it was something we could carry without flinching. So the question this leaves isn't whether you'd have raised the knife. Almost nobody believes they would. The question is which version you'd have written, because every one of those writers thought they were telling the truth about what happened, and every one of them changed it in the direction that let them live with it. That is not a Greek problem. That is just what it feels like, from the inside, to be someone who needs the story to come out differently. For more history explained through the psychology behind it, subscribe to The Inner History.